What does motherhood teach us about leadership?
A mother is a leader and protects her children, encourages their children, seeing what their needs are. The mom has to teach what her values are, what your family values are, politeness and moderate aggressiveness so they can accomplish what they want to accomplish.
Welcome to Motherhood Advantage, the podcast exploring leadership intelligence developed through motherhood. For decades, we've heard about the motherhood penalty, but what about the motherhood advantage? In each episode, we talk with one extraordinary mother about how caregiving shapes the way they think, decide, and lead. Because motherhood is leadership. Welcome, everyone. This episode feels especially meaningful to share because it brings us back to the beginning of Motherhood Advantage. While we are releasing this conversation at the close of the first season, and fittingly for Mother's Day, it was actually the very first interview we recorded. Before the podcast had a format, before I fully knew what this project would become, my mom agreed to sit down with me so that I could practice. Carol Crosta is a mother of 5 children, a retired emergency room nurse, and one of the most capable people I know when it comes to figuring things out, solving problems, and making sure her family has what they need. She's not a public speaker or a performer, but she's been in the front row of almost every opening night I've ever had. Her saying yes to this interview was an act of generosity and trust that helped make this entire season possible. A lot has evolved since we recorded this conversation. The podcast format has grown, the format has shifted, and the framework around my research has expanded, but the heart of the work has remained the same: exploring motherhood as leadership and recognizing the expertise, labor, resilience, and care that mothers carry every day. And honestly, there's something beautifully fitting about ending our first season where we began, with my very own mother. Mom, thank you for believing in me before this project even fully existed. I admire you deeply, and I'm so grateful for the example of strength, adaptability, and determination you've given our family. And now, here's the conversation with my mom, Carol Crosta. Hello, and welcome to Motherhood Advantage. I'm Dr. Laura Marie Rivera, and I am very excited to introduce our very first guest. My mom, Carol Crosta, is here visiting us from Sacramento and has agreed to help me out and be my dress rehearsal first draft. And I suppose as the woman that taught me everything I know, that just sounds about right. Right, Mom? Sounds like. All right. Will you tell us who you are, how many kids you have, and just a little bit about yourself?
Okay, I'm Carol Crosta, and I do have 5 children. I grew up in Western New York and went to nursing school there, a diploma program. And part of our first year, we were at a college, Canisius College, and I met my future husband there. After we both graduated, he went in the Air Force and we moved to California. He spent about 2 years in Vietnam. I also furthered my education once we were in Sacramento. I got my bachelor's degree in nursing and worked on my master's degree in nursing. I worked in a busy suburban emergency room for about 40 years, raising the kids. I chose to work nights because that worked well for our family. I was home all the time other than sleeping in the daytime while the kids were in school. Lately, in the last 25 years, I've been very involved in investment education, teaching it nationally and locally, and been president of 2 investment clubs. I learned a lot and I taught a lot. I'm very adamant about trying to teach children about investing so as they grow and get their first jobs, they will know that they can invest and plan for their future.
And I happen to recall that you're also very committed to encouraging women to invest. How come?
Because traditionally men have done it. In fact, when we started our women's investment club, we had a rule, no men allowed, because we were afraid they would take over and do everything for us. And now we sort of feel like we could take them all on and be their equal because we learned a lot. And it's not that difficult once you decide you're going to study it and learn it. And we did.
You mentioned you worked nights, which of course I remember, and you said that that's what worked for our family. And how did that work for you when you had 5 kids at all different stages. We span 14 years from oldest to youngest. And how did that work when you worked the night shift at a admittedly stressful job and came home to 5 kids?
Well, I came home in the morning because I work nights. So it was just getting them off to school and making sure they had their rides or the bus or whatever they were taking.
Wait. Just that? Just getting the 5 kids out of the house and off to school?
Well, making sure they had their lunches, trying to encourage them to make their own lunch so they had the time. Some of them were able to walk to the local school, and others were bused, and some I took to school. So it was a process of, depending on what point in my life it was, which way the kids got to school.
So this was quite some time ago, but did you have any sort of spreadsheet or mental image on how you got who where?
No, I just had it in my brain.
Okay, that's fair. Because you're my first interview mom, I'm just going to read the question to you. And the first one is, how would you describe your role as a mother? And we just talked about it a little bit, like some of the things that you would do in the mornings, getting the kids ready and delivered to school and all of that. But what are some of the roles that you performed, or tasks or responsibilities, and even accomplishments or skills that you gained working with your kids?
Well, a mother is a leader and also one who protects their children, encourages their children, seeing what their needs are. Some have different needs than others. One of my children were a very good athlete and providing avenues for that. Another one was very talented musically and making sure that there was exposure there and a place to use it. And at times when the schools they were in were not meeting their needs, you had to make a decision how you were going to solve that and sometimes even fight for it when you knew what was right for your child, even though the school wasn't agreeing. And it worked out in the end, but sometimes it was a little more difficult than other times.
Are you an advocate mother?
I am. I really like women to be very aware of investing. Traditionally, it's been sort of a male endeavor, and we started an investment club. There were about 20 of us when we started, and we said no men allowed so that they wouldn't be teaching us, that we would learn. And we were very successful in learning what we needed to learn.
What other avenues would you say you're an advocate for?
Equal opportunities for women. There's no reason for women not to be equal to men. In education, I very much want an education and promote it where it's applicable for kids.
You said protecting and encouraging. Would you say those are two of the top ones for a mom, or just the first two that came to your mind?
Probably near the top. Education, too, that the mom has to teach what her values are, what your family values are, politeness and moderate aggressiveness so they can accomplish what they want to accomplish. They don't have to just give up on the first time something's hard for them.
Would you say you're a moderate, aggressive mother?
Probably more people would describe me as aggressive and everything. People will even say, we'll do a Carol Crosta here, meaning we'll get something done.
Yes. You know, I like to call it the Carol Crosta School of Getting Things Done.
That's true. You have. And it never ends. Even though I don't have children at home, now it becomes a medical thing. My husband was diagnosed with a serious disease, and I learned about their centers of excellence in most disease processes. And if you want to get the best care, seek care at a center of excellence and just don't give up. Figure out what you need with all the help you can get and then go after it.
How did you learn to do that? I learned it from you, but where did you learn it?
I'm really not sure, but maybe it was just a process of being firstborn and having to get things done. One time, one of the people in our emergency room did a study on emergency room nurses. And it was very interesting. Most all emergency room nurses are either firstborn or only children. And we all laughed when we figured that out.
Did they do the same for doctors, I wonder?
Probably it would.
I would be curious. Was there anything that surprised you about being a mother, or maybe just a few of the things that surprised you?
Yes, the first surprise was when my first child was probably, I don't know, about 2 months old or however old she was how much I loved her. I mean, you think you're going to love your children, of course, but the whole being, the whole overwhelming thing about it was very transformative. And of course, the siblings that followed was the same thing, just really loving them and being very happy with that.
I agree. I still remember your very good friend, Nancy, who called me when I became a mother. And I think just a few days after I got home from the hospital, maybe. And she asked me if my baby was beautiful. And I said, yes. And she asked me something else. And then she told me that you never know how much you're loved until you have a child of your own.
And that's true. And you understand why your mother did what she did, even though at the time you were
Yes,
angry or
yes, yes, mother. Okay, back to the leadership. And I love that you describe mothers as leaders because that's why we're here. And now we're talking about kind of leadership in the paid workplace and in your role as an emergency room nurse and all of the things that you did and were in charge of in your purview, people and tasks. How would you say those aspects of the paid workplace relate to those of a mother? Are they similar? Are they different? Do you remember any overlaps or even any of the skills that you use in one avenue that you would cross over to the other?
yeah, I think being a mother teaches you that people are different. Your children are different and have different
Mhm.
needs, how to maybe solve some squabbles that are sort of on the minor side, but that works when you're working too. So everybody gets along. Just being positive gets you farther than being negative. And as my mother used to say, a little sugar is always better than vinegar. And it's true. Just smile and take time to hear what the other person is saying before you react to it. So you know that you really want to say what you want to say.
And it's been a while since you've been working in the emergency room. Do you have a sense on whether you worked on those personal and leadership skills in the emergency room and maybe brought some of those home? Or would you think it was more as a mother and kind of brought to the workplace because you were young when you started having kids and you were a young nurse as well, kind of around the same time, right?
Right. I think it's a little bit goes both ways. I mean, you learn some things from your children to take there, and sometimes at work, you're learning things from other nurses and doctors and patients, pointing out things to a patient that they hadn't thought themselves, and a little more informing them or educating them about the whole picture, what's going on. The same thing with children, making sure they understand what's expected of them and not the adult think they understand. Talk to them and make sure they understand.
So, kind of the teaching and communication aspects of both. Can you describe a time or an incident that reflects growth as a mother? And it could be like a personal time helping your children or one of them, similar, like maybe a growth opportunity in the workplace where you might have helped someone else grow.
Basically, pointing out things where you see that there could be a problem and pointing out to your children why it's important to follow certain things. One time when I was taking one of my children to college, there had been a lot of suicides because of grades at this particular school. And I really enforced, shared with my child that you don't have to have perfect grades. You can fail. What's the worst that can happen if you fail? And I remember thinking, I don't want her influenced by other people being upset because they're too much pressure on grades.
What other connections or even differences do you see in the leader track and the mother track? Or it could be similarities.
There are a lot of similarities. Getting along with people, encouraging people to do their best, educating them where there's a deficit and why that's has to be improved. Especially when you're working with critical information or critical instances, you've got to make sure everybody understands why what we're doing is important to be done. And the same with children, it's their lives, and you want them to have a good foundation for the rest of their life.
And you said it at the beginning about your role as a protector. And I'm just now connecting it back to your role in the emergency room as a protector, caregiver. I mean, that is the job.
It is, and you have to work with the other people to make sure the job is getting done. I mean, sometimes people are stressed, and you got to make sure everybody's alert and on duty.
I always thought that was very cool that you're an emergency room nurse, right?
Well, it was, and I loved it.
Well, it was a cool job. And I always felt very impressed to tell people that my mother was an emergency room nurse. I still do.
Well, retired.
Yes. But I think that's a neat job. And I remember even wanting to be a nurse when I was little
And I wanted to protect you from that
because
because it was stressful. And I've always thought if you work in a bank and you lose $1,000, they will probably fire you but nothing bad happens. You can go out and get another job. If you make a mistake in a critical care setting, you can kill someone, injure them, or kill them. And that was always in the back of your mind that you had to be on top of it and be very, very accurate because a mistake could be lethal. And I thought that I didn't want my children to have to go through that. But as I've gotten older and wiser, I think I've backed off from that because people learn and they are accurate and they do a good job. And nursing has lots of opportunities for young mothers. It gets you out of the 9 to 5, unless that's what you want, and you're home with your children more, and you can be the mother you want to be. And you don't have to have daycare when you work nights. Children have both parents all the time, one or the other, not both all together all the time, but they do have parents available at all the time.
And that's a really big ask or sacrifice for a mom, though, to be working. I mean, probably for anyone, but especially for a mother to be working all through the night and then mothering all of the rest of the time.
Well, I didn't do it when my children were real young. I was a stay-at-home mom for several years, and it was after they were school age that I was working.
So when you had a break. Okay. So the fun one, well, especially for me, because I know all of your children, is if you'll tell me something about each of your children. And it could be a specific characteristic or a fun story, a point of pride, or something they overcame, anything.
Wow, that's really tough. It's hard that you learn a lot with your first child, and sometimes you feel that you didn't do as much for the first one when you were learning how to be a mother. But our firstborn gets a lot done, and she's not afraid to speak up and say what needs to be done. My secondborn was my son. One of my children was critically injured, and we were spending 24 hours a day in the ICU at a trauma center. He went out and bought me a camping mattress. So when I slept on the floor, in the emergency room, I had a comfortable place to lay. And I've always remembered I didn't expect it from my son, and he did it. And that was really great. My third child is just sweet and innocent and always speaks out. And she's a joy to have, as they all are. But her sweetness is very encouraging. My fourth child is, I think, her mother reincarnated.
Thank you.
Very aggressive and gets things done, which according to birth orders, that's not supposed to be, but she is. And then our fifth child, she didn't reach her full potential because of being in an auto accident, but she was getting things done. I think she would never have been an aggressive mother because I think sometimes I embarrassed her.
You embarrass all of us, Mom. It's part of the job.
But I also think part of the accident she was in was because she didn't want to speak up. And I think an aggressive child would have spoken up.
She was always very soft spoken and very nice and very loving and a really good kid. Much better note. This is more of a contemporary question because it's talking about accommodations for mothers in the workplace. And maybe you've seen it going on in some of the work that you see other places, or maybe you think back to when you were working in the emergency room. Is there anything that would have been helpful or better or made your life easier in the workplace for trying to make it better for others going forward?
I worked for a great hospital and they were accommodating even like holidays. There's basically 5 holidays around Thanksgiving to Christmas. And we were able to say which one was most important to us and which one was least important. And I would advocate anybody that's scheduling people do that because it worked beautifully. I don't think I ever worked on a Christmas Eve working nights, but that was the one I wanted off. But I worked Thanksgivings and New Year's and stuff. And that's a way for managers of people to keep their employees happy rather than just saying, you are going to work Christmas and New Year's or whatever. And I think hospitals should be acutely aware of how to manage their people. And if people don't agree to sign up which holidays you want on or off, then they're going to be assigned. But give them a try, see if they can work it out themselves and have happy family life for the nurses that you do have.
The early days of a flexible, accommodating schedule, because obviously there was no work from home and you wouldn't be able to have done that anyway.
No, I met a young person at Costco. Actually, he was giving out samples in Costco, and he was thinking of going into nursing, but he's not going to do it now. He says, there's too much AI and AI is going to take away nursing. And I said, you still need people to take care of people. And I talked to him. I said, even as far as turning machines on, somebody needs to know what the machines are, what they tell, evaluate them. And I don't know whether I really got to first base with him, but I didn't think AI was going to take away nursing jobs.
Yes, I mean, it may change how they look, but I'm wondering, you kind of just said it, but having a human there and turning those things on, I'm not sure if it relates to our necessary motherhood and leadership discussion, but how does that work when the machines are telling you one thing or the experts are telling you one thing, or when you're getting a lot of maybe competing information, or maybe you know it's not right?
You look at the patient first. The machine can always go haywire and stuff. And is the patient breathing or whatever the machine is trying to tell you? And then you know what your machines do. And then you just check for faults going on or something that would have happened. And the human is much more important than the machine.
And what if the experts tell you something about your child that you don't think is true or right?
Well, you investigate it and you become very well schooled in whatever this problem is, so you can intelligently discuss that with a doctor. I one time had a doctor tell me, you're just a nurse. And I was pretty well educated on what was going on. And that's true. I was just a nurse, but I was holding my own and I did know a lot.
There's that word just again. One of the moms that is going to be a guest on my podcast coming up is Heather Ann Campbell, and she wrote a book called Good is Amazing. And there's a whole chapter on just and how much that word sucks. And because you weren't just a nurse, you were a nurse. And you're not just a mom, you are a mom. And when we use that word, we discount the whole thing that goes with it. Women are falling into that trap a lot. I don't know how many times over my life, but especially since I started thinking about it, I've heard someone say, just a mom. And just a mom is crap because it is such a big job and you are doing so many things. And just a nurse sounds like someone who is just a jerk talking to you.
That could be too.
I think so.
And grandparenting is very nice too, though.
Is it the same, but 20 years later, or is it very different?
It's not the same. In fact, I had one of my friends ask me one time, which I like better, being a mom or a grandmother.
Are you sure you want to say this on the record, Mom?
Well, what we decided, we liked being a mom better because we were in charge. And grandma, we weren't in charge. We were just an encourager.
What are you trying to say?
Well, it's true. I mean, it's your children's children, and they get to say what's going on, and you can support them and support the grandchildren, but it's different. And it's less overwhelming responsibility, too, because we don't have them 24/7 all those years.
Well, I think that's a really good note to end on. And our Seattle sun is starting to come out. So we've got soccer games and ballet performances to attend today. So, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, smile and wave.
Goodbye.
Perfect. Motherhood Advantage is based on the idea that if mothers are trusted to nurture, protect, and shape the next generation, their expertise should be recognized everywhere leadership matters. These episodes build on the work of Intuitionship, a groundbreaking research study with nearly 1,000 mothers, and now a nonprofit continuing to explore that intersection of motherhood and leadership. If you'd like to learn more, make a donation, or recommend a remarkable mother, please visit us at motherhoodadvantage.com. This podcast is hosted by Dr. Laura Marie Rivera and edited by Liz Aderhold, and is dedicated to all of the mothers who keep the world running, because motherhood may just be the most powerful leadership training ground in the world.